Well,
There we go.
thanks, Matt. By the way, if you hear someone in the background, this is her. Her name is Jing, both because she's an anjing and because I got her at Christmas. So it's Jingle, so she's my Indonesian Christmas dog. And she's wanting attention. So we'll just imagine that she's a kid in the background playing. Thanks for the invitation, Matt, and for us all being welcome, open to sort of shifting gears at the last moment. Hey, this actually is my first public presentation as Dr. Charley Sullivan, which is weird to think about that. And the original one was going to be an element of my dissertation, but it's not right for today. I'd actually like to start out with two acknowledgements. These acknowledgements have become important to me personally in the process of doing my work and thinking about the things I was thinking about and doing some of the other social work I was doing. So the first one is a land acknowledgement, and I'd like to acknowledge that right now I'm in Lawrence, Kansas, which lies on the ancestral lands of the Kansa and Osage nations on land ceded in the 1825 Caw Treaty. Currently, there are 4 federally recognized sovereign nations in Kansas, including bands of the Potawatomi, Kickapoo, Sac and Fox in Iowa. And I acknowledge all members of these indigenous communities who have stewarded this land through the generations, and I pay respect to their ancestors past and present. The second acknowledgement is that I acknowledge that Java, the island on which I carried out much of the research for my dissertation and the research that I'm going to talk about tonight a little bit, while now part of a free and independent Indonesia, was for centuries subject to the colonial domination of several European nations, including the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, and Portugal. And during its more recent history, including some of that that's covered in my dissertation, the United States government, including members of my own family, was involved in actions that had interventionist and violent effects on Indonesia and its people. Dan pada soal-soal itu saya mohon maaf sebesar-besarnya. Making these sorts of acknowledgements has come to me to be an important part of a process that I think we need to be aware of, that I'm going to be just talk on a little bit, which is the decolonization of knowledge and the decolonization of white Western interaction with Indonesia, with Java. And so part of what I'm glad to be presenting today is actually sort of movement into my next project, which I'm going to be doing, and I've been doing with one of my Javanese language teachers from Universitas Sebelas Maret, Pak Sisiono, FX Sisiono. So one of the things I was able to do, thanks to the Fulbright grant that I had when I stayed in Solo, was to take some time to start to learn Javanese, because having started dancing at 5 and having played Gamelan a lot, and sort of wanting to have a better understanding of Solo as a space, I thought it was important for me to know some Javanese, and just even to get around like in a daily way. And the first question that my other teacher asked me, Bu Endang Tribanarni, she asked me, so, do you want to learn to speak or do you want to learn to read documents? And I was like, I'm a historian, I'm reading documents. So I started to learn to read documents. And so my Javanese is still not very good in a daily sort of way, but I have a very sort of narrow and precise understanding of some language. The project is going to be, I don't know what yet, but we know what document it's starting with at least. The question that's interesting me is, across the 19th and 20th centuries, how Javanese thinkers and Javanese philosophy interacted with increasing sort of external Western and Islamic science coming in, and then sort of Marxist science coming in as well. So how older understandings of Java and of that space started changing and reflecting those interactions, and trying to do it from a Javanese-centered space, which means using primarily court documents or the documents out of the various collections in Solo and Jogja. As I'd sort of gotten about 4 months into learning this, and I could read decently well, and I started to have a little bit more vocabulary. One day, Pak Sis came into class. He says, "So I brought you a document that I want us to read together." I said, "Sure." And he sort of has never steered me wrong. It's called Pujian Hong Ilahin Kraton. So there are 2 versions of it that you can find in Nancy Florida's literature, Javanese literature and Surakarta manuscripts. One version of it is from the Radio Pustaka, and she describes it as a prose treatise on the creation of the universe and the generation of the Hindu Javanese gods, including the story of the birth of the god Kora that forms the text of the exorcism Ruatan ceremony for persons who are in ritual danger. And perhaps these days we're in some sort of ritual danger. These are most notably only children, but also include an extensive array of other unfortunate souls. Ruatan ceremony is normally performed as a wayang play. Treatise includes the texts of the mantras that are recited in the Paruatan Murakala performance. And so that's her description of the one in the Radio Pustaka, but the version that Pak Sis brought to me is actually from the Kraton Surakarta, which, if you want to check, is KS 392b in her first volume. And it is just a text of the Murakala Ruatan Wayang Lakon, including complete texts of magic incantations, scribal style from the court of Pakubuwono X. And she thinks it was inscribed sometime between 1893 and 1939, which probably is right. Well, I'm sure it's right, and she's also my advisor, so of course it's right. But given the paper and all these other ways that we have and the script, the scribal style. But the reason that Pak Sis brought it to me, Pak Sis is Christian, Javanese, not Chinese extraction. And he has been, I think he was worried a little bit that this sort of increasing Arab Islamicization of Javanese society was forgetting certain roots. And historically speaking, this document was probably generated during a very similar period, sort of in the 1830s, probably as far as we know. And there are a couple of interesting things that happen at the very beginning of the document. So the way that we've had this is the transliteration he and I worked on together from the Aksara Jawa into Javanese written in Latin script. And then I've done a translation of it based on our discussions and noted it. So it starts out as the very sort of first description of it is Kagung dalam serat kekidung kala ing zaman Buddha. So a court history or record in sung poetry of the times of the Buddhist era. And this use of this idea, Zaman Buddha, in that time is a very clear marker, he suggests, that this is not a strictly Islamic text. There are other places where it also is very clearly Islamic, but there's this idea of sort of trying, he would say, from, so if this is from Pakubuwono IX, as it says in this one, Pakubuwono IX reigned from 1861 to 1893, but it's probable that the text is actually older than that. It's just the copy of the text that was done during the reign of Pakubuwono IX. Then it starts with an incantation, which actually an invocation of the gods, which isn't really translatable, which is Hong Tata Winanchi Ha Wiganan Mastu Namasidum. The rough translation, actually it is translatable, but it's rough, is may all obstacles placed in the way be avoided through God. And it sketches out the letters in the way that Javanese texts can do fascinatingly, of AUM, which is also an abbreviation for Agni, which means fire, Udoka, water, and Maruta, or wind. Okay, so it's right up front telling you that it's dealing with a Javanese Buddhist, quote unquote, space, rather than as an Islamic document. And it came in a period, as I said, when some elements of Javanese elites were turning away from these new forms of Islam and making their presence known politically and culturally in Java, which is actually something that we see going on today as well as an issue. The beginning of it, it starts before there's anything, before there's nothing. So, puniko turun ning Jawa to watak nawang songo, sorry, tatkolo taksi awang awang uwung uwung. So this comes down from a god with 9 natures, and there are 9 gods who are the children of Batara Guru in the Wayang: Vishnu, Sumba, Swara, Mahaswara, Brahma, Rudra, Mahadeva, Sankara, and Shiva. And each is associated with its own number and its own color, and each of their wives are also important to the pantheon. But so this comes down from a god with 9 natures when the world was still without form. And it's this language, awang awang uwung uwung, which really sort of means, awang uwung means sky, and awang means hazy. So literally when sort of all things were hazy skies, that you're sort of existing in this sort of hazy space of just droplets of water perhaps in the air. And then it starts out, and this is sort of part of one of 2 things I want to point out in the text today. It starts with this sort of interesting series of opposites and what it seemed to be contradictory texts, which are at the heart of a certain type of Javanese philosophizing. And so it starts out to say, Apurwo tan tanono wetan, ono duksino tanono kidul, ono biobio tanono kulon, ona nurwiti tanono lor. So there was an east, duksino, but no east, kidul. There was a south, biobio, but no south, kulon. Right? There was a west, but no west. There was a north, but no north. It goes on then. There was an up, but no up. There was a down, but no down. There was a center, but no middle. There was a below, but no below. There was a side, but no side. Right? But without shape, nanging tampa rupa, rupane samono kaya ebun. So, but without shape, everything was dewy mist. Right? And then suddenly there's a mountain summit that appears. Or the beginning of a mountain, okay? So Mungu Pucuk in Alang Alang. And I'm sorry if my Javanese pronunciation is incorrect. Pak Marsam, you can help me later with that. At the mountain summit, or at the beginning, there was tall, coarse grass growing wild. And then, white was the shape of everything. And then appears Sanghyang Jagad Wungku Wiji Wisesa, okay? The God of the whole world, the seed of authority, okay? And again, it goes into a series of contradictions. He is a creator, but not created. He's endowed with power, but can't be overpowered. He can bring forth children, but is no one's child, right? And so a child came forth, Sanghyang Jagad Pramano, we say saw, right? And you have Pramono or Zopramono, which is the sign of life or a heartbeat, also the bearer of life to an individual, right? Life distinct from the soul. So maybe Patsis says the God with the power to bring life or spirit forth, but it's still in a general sense. It's not a specific person. It's not a specific character, right? And this person, or this being, Sanghyang Jagad Premona Wisesa, created a child, Sang Harta Hetu, okay? And then it says, Bosa Harta Wiwilangan, Hetu Bawuring Jagad Iki Smono. So the meaning of Harta is to count. And Hetu means the mixture of all things in this whole world. So someone who's capable, right, of counting and enumerating and seeing and naming and knowing the names of things, right? So knowing the meaning of someone's name is actually a pretty important element later in the Ruatan text, because it's critical to having power over the thing that you can name. So the implication here is that Sangharta Hetu can have power over things and that have been created, right? And then it says, misi wiwilangan kewala kinan ayogyo. So, and what he could count was compelled or ordered to be good. So this is the series, if you will. Patsis would say that Sanghyang Jagad Wungku Wijiwisesa seems to be the original source. And then Sanghyang Jagad Premono Wisesa is the spirit, the maybe embodied, maybe not embodied spirit of Jagad Wungku Wijiwisesa. And then Sangharta Hetu is the beginning of the expansion of that spirit into things which might be gathered together and counted that are distinct. And there's a connection here to Sufi cosmology, where the Zat Tuhan, the essence of God, becomes the Nur Muhammad, the light of Muhammad, becomes the bilangan, or the distinct and countable manifestations of God, whether or not you can see all of them at the same time. And so I said, so is this sort of like, Father, Son, Holy Ghost? How does it, connect to your own Christian beliefs? He says there was actually sort of more like, one image is to consider this as a prism splitting light into colors, right? Which all the time retain the full essence of the light, but also have their own individual spaces. The other connection he made was to Dewaruchi, so that when Bhima enters the ear of Dewaruchi, he can see the four colors, the four main colors, black, white, red, and yellow, that correspond to the four inner essences of people, the 4 steps of movement up the Sufi devotional path, and the 4 cardinal directions, which are all over these sorts of documents. And since Bhima is inside his own little mini ear, it's also clear that what he's seeing is his own self. So there's a unity of himself also then divided into countable elements, which is at the same time an empty shell, okay? So this idea of full emptiness, as he called it, is one of the things at the heart of Javanese mysticism. So one injunction to someone on that path of mystic study would be golekane glahing kanko, or find the meaning, find the core of the stem of a leaf of spinach, right? Which of course is empty. And another is golekane tapeking kontol nglayang, or find the footprint of a bird in flight, right? So again, it sort of asks the searcher to focus on the emptiness of something rather than its external form. And so you get these sorts of internal quests that need you to go inside to think about them, but have an external image, but yet that image also has emptiness, right? So these are sort of very important things to be setting up at the very beginning of the Murwakala, of the Lakon for Ruatan. And so Premana Wisesa is told, hey, you're supposed to bring forth a child. Don't create the world, right? The child of yours will have children there, and that's what will create the world. So there's no world yet in this space. And so Sang Premana Wisesa left in kono ono manuso, where mankind existed. So there's a timing issue, which is rather interesting, because if nothing was there, but then there's already mankind and he comes, that's something that we would have to think about, right? And there is something that occurs because of this. Mulane ono lintang jagadikismono. And therefore, there were stars in the world. Okay, so Sang Premana Wisesa goes to where mankind existed, and therefore there are stars. Okay, and what follows here is a series of connections between our world and the macrocosmos. Okay, so Sang Premono Wiseso Yogo Sowo Gungiro. So Sang Premono Wiseso's child was as big as a large snake. Rupane Kaya Anakanakan Kanchana. And he had the appearance of a golden doll. Okay, or maybe the child is a large snake, or maybe it's just as large as a snake. But it certainly sort of is a golden doll. But then since he's a golden doll, it's probably not a snake. This is the type of conversation that we would have going through these implications of what might or might not be in the text, which are fascinating, and which I'm very clear, even if I had been reading Javanese a long time, like this sort of understanding of the text is not something that would be possible for me, which again points out to the necessity of us working in a fashion that people who choose to work with us want to go, if that's a better way. So this golden doll was called San Anangkurat, and then you have a whole series of descriptions of his body to what happens as a result. So sinung tinggal kiwattangan mulane ono serangane serangenge. Yeah, I was right. Okay. So who was given eyes left and right, and that's why there's the sun. So the eye is like the sun, right? Sinungan idap ngisor duhur bulane ono bumi lan langit. Who was given eyelashes below and above. So that's why there are the earth and the sky. Jagadiki smono, in this world, okay? That's being created by the creation of this child. Sinungan alis kiwattangan mulane ono kekuwung, right? Who was given eyebrows left and right, so there was the rainbow. Sinungan ambekan, who was given breath, mulane ono jagad ikismono, so there was a world. So our breath is the center of the world, or the necessity for the world. Sinungan pasuki wattanang mulane ono gunung jagad ikismono, who was given the bridges of the nose left and right, so there are mountains in the world. Sinungan kuping kiwattanang mulane ono pepereng, so who was given ears left and right, so there were slopes of the mountains. Sinungan changkom mulai ono guwo jagadikismono, who was given a mouth, so there are caves. Bisa kedep mulane ono chleret, so whose eyes could flutter and blink. That is why light flickers before a storm. Mulane ono gelap, that's why there's lightning. Bisa wahing jagadikismono bisa watuk, who could sneeze in this world, who could cough. Mulane ono gludug, so there was thunder. Bisa seku mulane ono gerah, bisa ato mulane ono getar, bisa mola mule ono lindu, bisa ngadeg sang cundolo arane, who could hiccup, so there was thunder, who could belch, that's why the earth could tremble, who could move about, so there were earthquakes, who could stand up, right? Who is named Sang Chundolo, and that sort of Chundolo is very close to Chandolo or Watak Jahat. And so there was light in this world. Mulane onotejo jagad ikismono. Okay? So then it goes into a whole silsila, which is a genealogy of the gods, and this ends up connecting in the end the gods, and it is a little bit of modification of Islam in there. So Nabi Adam comes in, etc., like that. But mostly it's not Islamic. And it eventually ties down into the royal family. And this is a fairly standard sort of thing. But this idea that the microcosmos in this child is related to the world that we live in has another reflection in a different text that many of you may have seen, which is the Kidung Rumak Saing Wangi, when after the first stanza that we almost, Ana Kidung Rumak Saing Wangi, It then goes into a connection between my body and Islamic saints, right? So my voice is Dawood, is David, for example, is one of them, which sort of makes sense when you start to think about the theology of it. So there's also a sense then in this Javanese sort of understanding of the world between our bodies being an embodiment of the Islamic saints as well. So that's what brings us to this issue, which I think faces today, which is that of Zaman Edan, that of the time of crazinesses, the time where things are completely out of order, right? That it's not, and this is an issue that comes up, I think, in my dissertation some, that it's not a time that is just about the world being topsy-turvy and crazy and out of space and out of time, but because the world is a representation of the God's body, and then our body includes saints' bodies, that this is all tied together in a much more sort of personal way, the sense that the world is crazy, our body is crazy, what's happening is crazy, and it has to be brought back into line. And to a certain extent, that's the purpose of Ruatan, very simply said, is to bring things back into line that may have been out of line. Also part of the, major issues of Wayang, but you all know much more about that than I do. So I just thought it would be interesting for us to start about that, because what we do know is, as we're working on thinking about today and what's going on in our own society and how do we do that, is that this is not the first time that societies have gone weird, that societies have gone into internal conflict. And certainly Javanese society has done that multiple times, whether because of volcanoes or because of war or because of people getting pulled out to sea or because of famines. And so there's knowledge there, right? And I think the thing for me in reading this text as it kept going is just how complex the philosophy behind it is, and how easily we could read it as Westerners without having good knowledge from our friends and my teachers. And it could just become really exotic. Oh, there's East but no East. Oh, there's West but no West. So that's sort of where I am on this, and I thought that I'd start with this, and it was sort of scary seeing some of the names of the people who are in here, because some of you will know much more about this than I am. But it just sort of seemed like a space to sort of think about some of the central philosophical constructions of Gamelan and the Gamelan complex of arts, dance, etc., and what we might learn from that knowledge to help us as we move forward. So if there were any kekurangan, saya mohon maaf sesudahnya, and thank you very much.
Hey, Steve, just to let you know, there's some issue with your, Steve Laronga, there's some issue with your microphone. It keeps turning on and off. And then, thank you, Charlie. That was wonderful. Very cool text. Let's open this up for some discussion. Does anybody have any comments or anything they'd like to talk about with this text? Or is anybody familiar with this text already? Charlie, I was wondering if you knew originally when this text was written, how is it presented? Where would you have found this text?
So the two copies of the text we have are in royal collections. So one is in the Kraton Surakarta, the other is in Radio Pustaka, which is connected to the Kraton, although it's its own thing. I think the project that was going on from the early 19th century, so there's a process at that point when older texts are translated into modern Javanese. And so a lot of Machapat texts, a lot of texts on kingship, a lot of texts on proper behavior, and sort of where the other project is going to start is this. So beginning, who even knows? Well, so it's going to ask the question of, as the British were making themselves known, and as Javanese courts became clearer to Javanese courts that they were having to deal with external powers, because up to that time, so the VOC had been, the Dutch East India Company had been present, but not necessarily controlling courts. And it became clear with the British arrival that that was no longer going to be the case. And so one of the questions to look at is, what are the texts that became chosen for translation into modern Javanese? And a huge amount of them actually have to do with the, with two things that both are actually, well, one I was just going to say is about the authority of kingship. So why do we as courts get to remain, like powerful if we're powerful? And the other was about sort of mystical knowledge. And a huge number of them that Nancy Florida worked on are actually about Sufi Islam. And so those are sort of three elements that are there, and those are all tied up together. But Pat Sis wanted to look at this one precisely because it sort of is presented in this period of time as being outside that Islamic space. It still is clearly an Islamic text. It still clearly has Sufi issues going on in there, but there's a desire to name it something else that's Buddhist. And it's this it's a presentation, in one of the earlier presentations, as far as I know, and I don't know enough, but at least within this sort of set of collection of documents, manuscripts, one of the earlier ones of some of these things about, like, think about the center of a stalk of spinach, like what's the essence of the center of a stalk of spinach, or, what's the footprint of a bird in flight. And these sorts of, again, and then these sort of contradictions of there's east but no east, there's no north but no north. The same folks who are doing this are thinking and writing about Gamelan, and they're doing Dalang stuff, and they're they're choreographing. So it's not unusual that, the two ritual dances out of the courts have 4 dancers or 9 dancers, right? So the 4 dancers, which are the cardinal directions, right, and are often referred to as that, and then the 9 dancers, and we talked about sort of the 9 gods and stuff like that. And that's just one of multiple sets of meanings that then get grafted onto those sorts of things. So part of, as we're sort of thinking about Gamelan and how it is, there's always, and Midianto talked about this a little bit, there's always these deeper meanings, and you're not always going to get them, and folks aren't going to tell them to you because they're not for us, which is fine, right? But they wrote some of them down. And Javanese scholars know about this because they wrote some of them down, right? So I don't know. So yes, 4 directions, 9 rasas, Jodi, all of that stuff sort of layers on top of it and on top of it. And if you go north, south, east, west, up, down, inside, edges, center, I think that comes down to 9 as well. But it's also then laying out a mandala, right? So, yeah. So how does that sacredness of the body relate to what is going in our country right now? So the question, I think, Jody, is that there's this ideal perfect system, and then that perfect system gets janky. It gets upset, right? And how does one come back into order? I think that, and that these upsets in a Javanese sense are not just about the world out there, right? And they're not just about what's internal, but they see those things as related in a way that maybe we don't think about as much. Does that make sense? Maybe, maybe not. So how not? Tell me, because this is just very beginning work. And so, and I'm not wanting to make too much of it. I just thought that there were some interesting things in here to think about.
Yeah, let's start this conversation. Sumar-san or Jody, do you have something you'd like to contribute?
Hello, Mas Charlie. How are you?
Pak Marsam, thank you so much.
This is a very a big topic, of course, because it has something to do with the tracing of the past, in what way that element of the past being present in the present time.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you're going to proceed this topic by searching for the genesis of that text.
I think that's part of what we're going to try and do.
Yes.
Batsis said, okay, you finished your dissertation. Let's talk next week about what we're going to do. And I said, we have COVID. Our country's going crazy. Maybe next month. So we're still going to discuss sort of what that is. But I think one of the things that he wants to look at, again, is sort of, are there also then antecedents to the text before, say, 1800 and what's being brought in? Of course, the problem here is always a problem of sources. So once things were written on paper, it got easier, but there was looting. There's a reason that that some of the best collections of these documents are in London. And so things have gotten lost. And then also there's this whole process of reusing paper, so that if you've written a text on one side of paper and then you've recopied it for somebody else, then you use the other side of the original copy to write something new because paper was there. So I think it's part of that, but I think one of the things we're thinking about is, can we find 4 or 5 or 6 texts that string together in different times? So one of the first ones would be one of the original versions in modern Javanese of the Kidung Rumok Sawing Wengi, which dates to about 1803. And of course, it's Macapat. It's very well-known text, but the full version is very, very long. It's not just those first 13 verses. It's like 90 or more. And some gorgeous poetry. So Dandang Guru doesn't just always have to be that one text. There's a great one about Ono Kayu. There's a tree in the world, and it's just a gorgeous sort of text that comes out of that. Then something in this area, and then you start to get texts where Javanese cosmology is compared with Dutch cosmology. So there are 14 ways that we think about planets and stars, and here are the 14 ways that this French thinker also says about planets and stars. So there's a desire to start to compare those two, and those move out of poetry and into prose. And then there's a really great document from the 1920s, which is a list of sort of rusak sacred spaces, right? And it's done in as a matrix. So you have where it is, what it's doing, who goes there, why, and so then you have to fill in the boxes, right? So there's also this sense of how Javanese text itself is moving. and being used at times. And there's already this sense in 1920 that this tree or this sendang or this space is already, sudah tidak kuat lagi. It's already not strong. It's already been destroyed, these spaces. So we have to preserve them. And so you get this very sort of Dutch, and sometimes it's even saying it's exactly 1 kilometer north of this marker is part of the ways that, so there's this whole way in which Javanese sense of land and the space that they're in shifts over that century, which is sort of what we're trying to maybe look at, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. Very good. The things to me though, since you're talking about Zaman Buddha and entering to Zaman Islam, perhaps the emphasis will have to be in what way that transformation happens from Buddhist, Hindu to Islam. And of course, you mentioned about Dewaruchi, which must be an art, has done the work on that in terms of the original of the Dewaruchi, actually is Navaruchi from the Hindu time. And the transformation of it by Yosodipuro, and entering to it is the Alwamah Mutmainah, that 4 colors, and so on and so forth. I have also very interesting your point about this the Jamanetan, the Krisi time. It seems you seems to saying that the Krisi times happened every period in the different period of time.
No, tell me more.
Well, I mean, if you think about, I'm just listening to Nancy's talk, but last semester, it turned out that Ronggo Warsito Kolotito actually is not original work. It was already mentioned in Centini. So maybe that Jamanitan has also done, did happen before Centini. So that kind of things. And of course, that the interpretations of how many dancers, whether 4 or 9, that's also very interesting. I don't know whether that's only in the creation of the court or maybe even outside of the court. But we just looking at these Dutch images from 17th century from West Java. The dancer is actually consists of 9 dancers.
9 dancers,
Right. So it's a very interesting. Again, this is sort of the multiple interpretations of the meaning of things.
Absolutely, and tracing those interpretations is hard. But I'm gonna let Pak Sis lead me where he thinks the interesting thing is, and he knows much more, and I know how to get it into English. And I know the questions that the English language literature is asking, and he knows the questions that sort of the Javanese philosophical set are asking. And so I think it's going to be an interesting way of working. And that's mostly what I'm looking forward to. I just get to go be a student of a really brilliant person for another 15 years or so.
I'm looking forward to your talk on Bung Karno, actually. So,
so am I. We will come back to that.
Great.
But also a Jaman Edan, if there ever was one in 1965, 66. Yeah. So thank you.
Jodio's asking if Jaman Edan is similar to Goro Goro.
That's out of my area. That's definitely a Gamelan question for folks who would know more than I will.
Bringing it back to this crazy time, maybe we can shift the discussion a little bit to maybe what we're doing now. I don't know if people saw my email about the statement that Nusantara Arts put out about this. And this is something where we felt that we had to say something because, you know, we are an American arts organization that's founded upon the brilliance of the art of another culture. So it ties very much into respect and it ties into all these different issues of post-colonialism and stealing art and using art and respecting the source of what you are using. And also the rights of other people around the world, and the rights of people that are in our own world here in the United States. So we have a few, we have, I think, 6 different core values that our organization believes are very important. So the three of the ones that I highlighted in that were inclusivity, cooperation, and preservation. And we came up with these core values before we even formed our organization because we wanted to have a very stable base for our organization so that we had a reason to exist. And these things seemed like they were intrinsically important to the success of an authentic Gamelan organization. And I'm not sure how other people feel about this and what are the important things within Gamelan that brings such a diverse group of people to it, right? We have people from all over the world that learn this music. And what is it about this music and what is it about Javanese culture that maybe we can learn from and that we can encourage in our own practices, in our own organizations? So I want to just put that out there to the group and see what people had to think about, think or say about that. It looks like my internet connection's bad. I'm sorry.
How do I raise my hand on this?
Who is that?
Oh, that's me. Sorry. I was trying to figure out how to raise my hand.
It sounds like you just raised your hand.
Oh, okay. I was going to say...
who is me? Who is me?
This is Julian Drummond.
Julian, good to hear you.
Thanks, you too. I always bear with me on this because I'm still kind of collecting my thoughts here. I think part of the reason maybe Gamelan is so widespread throughout the world has to do with this music being given legitimacy by Westerners such as Claude Debussy, who wrote extensively about Gamelan. And that's just one idea that's kind of been on my mind every now and then, something that I think about. Like, if there weren't like esteemed composers from Europe writing about this music, would it have as much of a widespread following, for lack of a better word? That's all I had to say.
Thank you. I believe Jody she has her finger up.
Yep. I think the spread of Gamelan in the way that we all practice it owes more to Mantle Hood's idea of bimusicality than it does to Debussy. Because it was Mantle saying you should sit down and learn to play the music if you want to understand it, and then look at who Mantle's students were: Judith Becker, Robert Brown, Robert Garfield. They all spread out across the country with that idea that you should play it. And I think that's been more of an influence on most of us personally. I mean, I don't know anything about Western music, so I only have studied Gamelan, so that's. But Midianto and Paksus, Tarjo Susilo, have talked really eloquently about the life lessons that are inherent in Gamelan literature. Things about community, about humility, about one person not being more important than another person. And I think for some of us, maybe Gamelan's the first time we learn those lessons. Well, the problem I'm having now is I'm trying to imagine what it will take for us to be safe enough to be in a little gamelan room with mallets and instruments next to each other, and it be okay to be in there. I mean, as someone who doesn't go anywhere, I don't go grocery shopping. I have a partner who's 85. The juxtaposition between the safety that we're creating for ourselves and what it means to play gamelan it's about as far apart as you could be. I mean, how do we disinfect all the mallets and every key and, stay 6 feet apart? I mean, even though playing gamelan is what I do every day, pretty much, and now I'm not doing it at all. I'm having trouble visualizing what it will take for us to be able to do it again. That concerns me quite a bit.
I think that Jody's concerns is also the concerns of the institutions like Wesleyan. We've tried to figuring out what happened next fall if the gamelan class still has to be done online, which is impossible. So the idea of hybrid, that is to enlarge the space of the gamelan so that it can have a 6 feet distance from one instrument to another. And maybe that's the way to do it on the 50% of the practical stuff, and then the half of it will be lectures or listening assignment and showing the films. And that's at least what we have in mind if it has to be done in terms of face-to-face class, but need to widen the space of the gamelan where we play, which is at Western is possible. We can move some of the instrument down into the floor, the dance floor, and it can be done. But I like Julian's take on that idea that gamelan's becoming a spread all over the world because of the being legitimized by Western Western people, which is in a way that's sort of true to what Julian was saying, because I think the fact that Java was being colonized for a long time by the Westerners, and of course you all know about the Europeans brought the gamelan to Paris expositions, London in 19th century, and so on and so forth. That's part of the equation why the gamelan is has a powerful impact. In a way, this is sort of a Western legacy, partly. Then take it from there, I guess.
I'm raising my hand.
Yep, go ahead, Jody.
This isn't, I don't know, Charlie, maybe you can find a way to fit this into philosophy that you know, maybe from chaos comes order. I think that it's only because of the virus that we have been able to have the kinds of protests that we're having. Only because everyone is home and has been home for a long time and is ready to not be home, and because people's jobs have stopped. And so the things, the rhythms that would keep life going, they all stopped. So when this thing happened, everyone had the space and the time in their life to say, wait, this is really important. I mean, 7, 8 days, thousands and thousands of people. I haven't seen anything like this, you know, since we protested against the Vietnam War, and I'm not even sure that was as extensive. So really we have to thank the virus for making this kind of public community statement possible. And I'm wondering if there's a Javanese parallel, that only when the entire world falls apart, everything that's normal disappears, that only then can our minds be clear enough to see what's really important.
Yeah, I mean, you know, what I do for a living is I coach rowing. So I have 60 athletes whose season stopped a week before we were supposed to have our first race. And we all went away. And for the first 10 days, we were not allowed to Zoom. That was against the rules. So we were calling, and then we were Zooming, and then we were having stuff that was going on in there. And one of the things that I said, sort of as we created this new order for dealing with these 60 young women, that I was sort of saying was, you know, other stuff is going to come of this. And they said, well, what makes you think that? And I said, well, because what's going to happen, sort of thinking with my historical hat on, is that this will reveal other things, right? It may not create them, but it will reveal things already there, which I think is fundamentally part of what's going on in terms of now race and racial problems, which is the American original sin, right, in many ways. But Jody, I'm really struck with what you've said about there's also timing and causation, right? So because we were not all home, or because we were not all out at work, because we were not distracted by other things, because we had been brought, if you will, into our own ears to look at ourselves and count the parts that we are. And please don't make this as a really serious, I'm just trying to sort of use the language we had earlier. I'm not trying to make a big case, right? But because that has happened, right, we are able to figure out truths and put ourselves back together, right? And that sort of would be what you would get out of De La Rucci. That's also what you get out of the Murwakala. And part of the Murwakala that's really important is, again, this ability to name things. So one of the ways that you can take care of you know, is to be able to, so the sort of names written on the back in very complex ways, and the ability to read that then gives you power over something. So I'm wondering if, like, we've been surrounded by so many lies. We've been surrounded by so much samkuni in the ear, right? And now, like, sort of, there's a little bit of, no, I'm sorry, that's bullshit, you know? And so I think we are in this space, but I think that we can see, because we can, even if I just made up all those connections and I can't back them up in a way that Nancy Florida would be happy with at all, right? There still are these ideas there that we've been that have been being looked at least in our world, right? Our Gamelan.
Can you say something more about the significance of names? Because in watching the protests, naming people has been an incredibly important and repeating theme. We have to say George Floyd. We have to say their names, So what's the power of saying a name or naming someone, and how does that, is there a parallel in the Javanese philosophy that you're talking about?
Sure. Well, even in the part that we saw there, right, what makes something countable, what makes something knowable, is the ability to distinguish it, the ability to separate it from other things, right? The ability for it to have a name. This idea of, and you see this in the Wayang all the time, and Mas Midi could tell us a lot more than me, but like the idea of being able to name someone is often like the biggest weapon in a fight, right? It is very important to be able to say, oh, this is who you are, that's what this is, and I know you and I see you, right? I'm also thinking of the AIDS quilt, where names were very, very the sort of important part, or the Vietnam War wall now, again, where you have sort of a list of names that comes out. Or my uncle died in the first 2 weeks of COVID, and when the New York Times did that, he was on the first column, and my mother found it and outlined it in red and took a photo and sent it to all of us, right? And the power of just sort of, George Freeman Winfield, Vermont, he could make anything grow. Like, but it named him, and it named something that was about him, and it distinguished him, right? So I think there is that power, but maybe Mas Midi or Marsam, you can sort of talk a little bit about names and the importance of knowing names. It's just an important part in this particular story of being able to read the name off the back.
I wanted to ask Midianto, when one begins to study Wayang, is knowing the name of every character the first thing you have to do? You have to know who everyone is before you can start learning the stories or the sabatan or the music. How important is it to know the name, the multiple names of every Wayang character?
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I hope you are well and safe. But first, it's a very deep topic, Mas Charlie, that you brought up to us. This is not even Javanese master of artists knowing what you're talking about, because it's a secret knowledge, and especially you're talking Awang Wong. That if you're talking about Awang Wong, you're talking about dissertation, and we are in a TK class.
Yeah,
that's way too far, but it's a good to start. But then about the dandang gula tulak bolo ono kitung, yeah. My understand that is dandang gula by Sunan Kalijogo. It's a late.
That's who it's attributed to. Yeah.
Right. This is a Muslim already. It's nothing to do with Buddhism, yeah, thing.
Yeah.
Then yeah, but mostly the books, whatever you're reading, the ruwatan, that's some of it ruwatan, but it's yes, from as Marsam said, it's mostly Dewaruchi. From Nawaruchi is already happening there, and why there is Dewaruchi, I have no idea. But my understanding, Dewaruchi is also teaching Muslim to go to the higher level called Ma'rifat by Sunan Kalijogo. So I don't understand, I don't know what is the connection is there. But again, the Dewaruchi, my father, his favorite lakon story is Dewaruchi. And then he told me, don't ever do Dewaruchi unless you know what you're doing. Otherwise, if somebody asks you to do wayang and the host asks you to Dewaruchi and you do it, if there's lakon of Dewaruchi, a request by the host is crazy, the dalang is more than that. It's something that is out of a human being's knowledge can do. How can you talk about yourself without, how can you talk something without you experiencing it? As you mentioned, even you go inside, there's 4 colors and things like that. You have to experience it before you telling. Otherwise, you telling people just, oh, that's what the book said. Okay, scholarly is okay, but you have to scientifically, you have to have a proof.
Yeah.
That's the Waruchi. Then about wayang, story about wayang, actually myself, no, I know nothing. Pak Marsam is have a formal learning to be dalang, learning about pedalangan in the Kraton. So Pak Marsam is way, way, way back of what I know. So Pak Marsam is very, very senior, and he got the knowledge directly from the master of the dalang, the guru of Manggurus of the dalang. So he is no more. But I know how to play wayang without learning. I just watching it. And how do I know about all of the characters? When I was a kid, like 6 years old, our toys is the wayang that have like 100 characters of important wayang, and you gamble with it. And so you know who is Baladewa, who is Hanuman, who is that. I remember that. So among kids, they are gambling with this wayang character. So almost every kid, in my kids, even Pak Sumarsa maybe, they knows the characters, even whether you like the wayang or not. That I think that's why I learn about the wayang. But nowadays it's different because sometimes, you know, how many Kumbakarnos nowadays? There are so many because each dalang they create that far away from the original. So okay, please be happy and take care of yourself. Don't be sad. If not playing gamelan, we all experiencing it. But an example is Mas Alex from Chicago. He's doing lots of recording back and forth with my wife. It will be came out superb. I think will be available for everyone. So he keep adding. He play gender, rebab, and so on. And then my wife added sindenan on top of it. Soon will be out actually. So yeah, you can do with your friend or your student doing simple lancaran or something like that for fun. Gamelan will never die. Gamelan will never die. It's all over. It's keep adding and adding. Yes, I appreciate Bob Brown, who spread all of the gamelans around in America for sure. I think Wesleyan, Hawaii, University here in California, San Diego, and also where somewhere Wisconsin. It's by Bob Brown. Bob Brown is the only person scholar that brought super Japanese sinden and gamelan into America, whether like it or not. But that's because of Bob Brown's effort. And yes, I agree with Pak Sumarsam. What will happen if it's still gamelan is not allowed to be person to person? Online will be very, very difficult. But it still can be better. We can do the best we can online rather than nothing. So learn how to sing, or how analyzing song of lancaran, something like that. Very simple for beginning student. That is, I think my situation and Pak Marsam is about the right. We are teaching academically in the classroom. So it's just from simple song. That's all. No gending, because they are all student first semester, second semester. That's it. And then I have a community. Yes, and then can play whatever they want. Thank you very much. Well, yes, Mas Charlie, keep going, keep doing whatever you're searching. I have no idea. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mas Midi, and I'm hoping also that Mas Midi will help me with a little project that I have going. I composed a piece for my uncle, which is a 4-part male choral setting of a requiem text set to work with the Kidung Rumok Song Wongi. So I'm hoping he'll sing it on top of the recording I'm going to do with my 4 friends. So we'll see how that works. So there are ways that you can be creative, I think, during this time, and find ways of making it work as well.
I'd like to bring up a question real quick of who is playing gamelan music in the United States? In my group, we have some Indonesian people, and we have, we have a lot of white people in our group, and we have some other people. But one of the ways that our organization wants to grow in the future is to engage with more diverse communities. So how can we do that? And it's a little bit different for us because we are outside of the university system. We don't have students coming to us. We have to go and find our students. So I'm wondering about or if people have some concepts of how we can engage with more diverse communities so we can bring gamelan music to a wider audience, and we can get a more diverse group of players of gamelan music in the United States.
Hey, shush. So, Matt, when I was at Michigan, one of the job I had was at the Center for Southeast Asian Studies and was charge of all their programming, and we were very lucky to have funding, and funding is part of it. We brought in for 6 years, Javanese artists for full years, and some of them for multiple years. But we always insisted that there be an outreach component into the Ann Arbor public schools. And we developed a relationship in particular with a school that we chose, one, because the principal was all on board, and that's critical, right? And there were some teachers there who thought it was cool. But secondly, because it wasn't the all-white rich school in town, right? And so over the course of those years, the number of students that we managed to have from all sorts of backgrounds, parents that came in, and it just became something that they really liked and did. So, I mean, that's one way I think it can be done, which is to try and develop long-term relationships with particular schools. My understanding, I don't know, I think it happened after I got that, but those kids would probably be in the middle of university right now, just sort of like that we worked with. And I've heard some of them went to Michigan and started playing gamelan. So because they'd done it when they were in 6th grade, something like that. So I think that one of the things that's great about your organization is that it is community based. And so you have sort of this idea, this ability to sort of say, hey, your music program just got cut because of the budget, but we can provide you something. We can provide you something that also then has a cultural component on top of it, that has a multicultural element to it, that has this sort of world knowledge element to it. But I think one of the things that's critical to it is having good artists to do it, so that, again, folks are getting taught by people who are really good. Because excellence sort of draws that. So that's money. That's like going to Asia Foundation, Asian Arts Foundation, saying, hey, we want to do this. That's finding a donor and saying, and by the time you bring someone from the United States, put them up, pay them properly, which I think is critical. I mean, you're looking at $80,000 to $100,000. Right? That's sort of about where the budget comes in. And there are plenty of houses in Solo that are built with Michigan Gamelan money. I guarantee you that, because folks will come and get paid at an American rate. But we also thought that was important in terms of just being ethical. Not to say, oh, we can get some Indonesian who will work for $20,000 because that's more than they already make back at EC or something like that. So it was hard to maintain, that's for sure. But the outreach component of it, I think, had legs, as long as it wasn't just like in for 3 months and then gone.
Yeah, that's a great insight. Sorry, I turned off my video because of some internet issues. But yeah, I think that's something that we, in our group, we actually started doing some programming like that last year. But like you said, it was me going to schools and presenting the music in a hands-on experience with kids, and the kids loved it. And these are we did a lot of English New Learner programs. So Buffalo has a ton of immigrants compared to a lot of cities. It's one of the places where refugees are actually resettled in the United States, one of the top places. So you have a lot of classrooms with kids from maybe like 12 or maybe more different countries, and they're all learning English in the same way at the same time. So these were really cool programs to be involved with. But it's hard to do them all the time without the funding, like you said. So
yeah, for sure.
So we'll
so
see.
Writing a Wayang Sandosa script or a Wayang Saningris script, for those kids is great. They write a script, they develop a story around Hanuman or something like that, and and it works great.
It's a really
but
cool
the
idea.
Teachers have to be into it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing for us too in Buffalo is, we're a really performance-oriented group. So we play about 16, 17 shows a year in Buffalo, all over the place. And one of the things we want to do going forward is find more interesting places to play shows where people can see us and see gamelan music that otherwise would never hear gamelan, would never get to experience gamelan. So whether it's playing in different schools or different cultural celebrations around the city, street performances and things like that, that's something that we're always looking to do if we can. And hopefully we can do more of that in the future. Oh, Jody asked here, Charlie, what do you mean by write a Wayang Sandosa script?
Sure. I was just going to answer it in the cast. So Wayang Sandosa is wayang yang pakai bahasa Indonesia. So wayang that uses Indonesian rather than Javanese. And it was a form that sort of came out of EC, both Surakarta and Yogyakarta, from the students who wanted to have a way to be able to reach an audience that didn't necessarily speak Javanese. And the other element of it that's important is they started playing with the question of using multiple actors and multiple puppeteers, right? Rather than a single dalang. And then they were also able to play with projection because people could be back and people could be close to the screen. And so you could have tiny little shadows and huge shadows. So one of the things that happens with that is that you then have, rather than just one dalang responsible for telling the story, you can have kids with lines that they have, and so you had some kids reading the lines from the side and you had other kids behind doing the puppetry motion for those lines, right? So they had to work as a team. But so the couple of times that we did it, we would say a theme. So one of the themes we did was like Hanuman saves the forest. So the theme was, saving the rainforest, and you had the fire demon, and you had this demon all trying to come and take over that, and Hanuman gets all of the animals to go back and fight them, and a very simple sort of story in 3 acts. And we had 3 6th grade classrooms in the school, and each one of them wrote 1 act, and then and so the teachers had to work together about sort of what was happening, and then it was presented with, the first class did the first act, second class did the second act, third class did the third act. Again, sort of like there's some special cases for really special outreach. So the very beginning with the sort of the proper opening, we actually taught to a young boy who had been having discipline problems in class. And as soon as we, African-American young man, and as soon as we gave him, we explained to him that this was really, really special, that he had to get this right, he serioused up in what we were doing, and suddenly he serioused up in the rest of the work, and the teacher's like, we've never seen this out of him. But he was carrying the sense that he had to do this special thing and do it right. So, I think there's also then some ways of sort of meeting some new, meeting some kids with some new opportunities. It was just a great thing. There is someplace, and I don't know if it's still on their website or not, there was a good movie made about it as part of the outreach project as well. So that was, I thought, and then the younger kids were learning to dance. But I thought it worked really well, and you know, they all came out knowing who Hanuman was, and it was really cool to the Indian kid that there was a Hanuman, because he knew who Hanuman was. He'd known who Hanuman was since he was a little boy, and here he got to play with Javanese Hanuman, and it was important to him that he got to do Hanuman because he knew Hanuman, right? And it was important to his parents, and all the pictures of him holding, you know, holding the puppet, and his parents so proud, and you know, that he had worked really hard. And this was kid totally opposite, right? Brilliant kid, never a problem. And he also taking it really seriously, you know? So I just think there's an opportunity for those, but it takes funding, and it takes the right connection to the school. And then, so you do it once or twice, and then it sort of, you know, unfortunately goes away. So yeah. And Joko Susilo has done Sandosa stuff with Maori legends. So I think that if you're in a multicultural space, then you can do that with, you know, if you have a large Arab population like we did in Southeast Michigan, you could do that with, you know, with sort of Syrian tales if you wanted to.
Julian, if you're still there, do you want to talk about what you sent me on Facebook? You had some concepts for repertoire in Gamelan that would be maybe an interesting topic of conversation.
Well, it's just something I noticed. I don't think I've never noticed this like in an ensemble performance like in the States, and I can only really speak for like, you know, musicians in the US. But just one thing is to just avoid ever doing would be to not ever program or even try to transcribe and publish the balungan for a piece if you know full well that it is Orde Baru or Transmigrasi propaganda.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
There's just some pieces out there from that period of time that have made their way into recordings. The two most blatant examples I can think of are called Orde Baru and Transmigrasi. They're both Lantron, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just part of, I don't know, I feel like part of one's responsibility if you're in ensembles to just not program propaganda like that. That was all I'd really thought about.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not sure if anybody's run into those particular pieces, but it's good to be aware of that so that, we're not programming, some racist propaganda.
I guess the gist of it was just to like, you know, just look into like what you're playing, just research what you're playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. Does anybody else like to jump into this conversation and add any comments or concerns or just discussion topics?
Hey there, Matt. Everyone. I just have a wish to everyone. Keep playing gamelan. Keep searching the knowledge of gamelan, learning from different teachers the best you can. Because every teacher, they have a different ways of teaching it, and there's no good and bad about it, because they qualified as gamelan teacher. It's only different. So gamelan is a reflection of human behavior to get rid of egoism discrimination or casting, low caste or high caste. We are all equal, helping each other. As I always say, when you're joining the Gamelan orchestra, you have to be responsive and interactive to one another, help each other. No one better than others. That's why the Gamelan orchestra, there's no soloist. There's no soloist. And we need each other. Even you play katok. Katok is very important in the kending. Kenong is very important. Gong especially. Even you play kending. Katok 4 arang to katok 8. We need that gong. And if the irama 2, irama tadi, the every downbeat about 3 seconds, that means 3 second time 64. How many minutes is that the gong players have to wait? Very long time. But this is the way the gamelan to train us to be patient. And in the end, even if wait long time and the gong strike in the right time, everyone just so happy. Gamelan is for happiness for all. No discrimination, no egoism. Once more, thank you very much, and keep playing gamelan, do the best you can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Midianto. It's wonderful sentiment to share with everybody. And that's definitely how one of the reasons why I was originally drawn to gamelan music was because of its potential for this sort of equanimity between players. And you do see that when you go to Java as well, when you play with gamelan players there, the lack of ego, you know, the respect for each other, the listening, it's quite wonderful. Maybe unless anybody has any more they would like to discuss. The other thing we were thinking about doing was maybe just doing some more listening tonight. We have some more recordings suggested by Midianto and Darsono. Maybe we could take a listen to some of these recordings that I have pulled up here. But if anybody would like to continue this conversation in the chat box while we listen to these pieces, I'd really like to encourage that. And if anybody wants to continue this discussion outside of this chat room, that's fine in the future. I know Jessica, who is our discusser on Sunday, is really interested in continuing this conversation to figure out how we can improve these things and try to improve the world around us through the music that we play. So let's try to keep this on the forefront of our minds rather than something that's an inconvenience. You know, this is actually one of the reasons why we're artists, is because we understand these things, right? So, and we can help the world with what we're doing. So let's keep that in mind, and maybe I'll share this music, and we can keep chatting if we want to.
ngendika watu tias
probably going to call it a night here. Thank you everybody for hanging out and enjoying some music with all of us. And we will be back on Sunday with a Gamelan lecture. Let me actually just pull it up. I don't remember what we have on Sunday. Let me take a look here. Oh yeah, it's going to be very fun. We have Novyandi Saputra and Palmer Keen, Gamelan Worlds of South Kalimantan. So we have a Banjarmasin-based ethnomusicologist, Novyandi, who will be joined by Oro Archipelago founder Palmer Keen, who share the details of their work on the Gamelan Worlds of South Kalimantan. So this is from Novyandi's lifelong immersion in the Gamelan Banjar tradition and Palmer's research on the ritual gamelan of the Dayak Halong. So that will be on Sunday, and we will see everybody then. Thank you. Have a good night.
Cody's cat.